House of the Dragon is back this week with episode 5 of season 2, and following the Fallen in episode 4, a sense of mourning, grief, and the fear of the unknown loomed as a large cloud over Dragonstone and also King's Landing. With Daemon's visions and his desire to sit on the throne rising to the surface and mirroring that of Aemond's, the green and black arcs are starting to mirror each other without any of them even realizing. So with that, let's jump into the video and break down all that there was to take away from this episode character by character. Here is House of the Dragon Season 2 Episode 5 Ending Explained. Just to let you know, this video will contain spoilers. Alicent. I found Alicent's involvement in this episode to be some of the most interesting moments that we had within it. We saw her acting as a mother and feeling a sense of fear not only for the fact that her son could be facing death, but also the fear for the people in King's Landing, considering it was now going to be under the rule of Aemond, who was acting as regent whilst Aegon was in a condition where nobody knew if he was going to live or die. Alicent felt as though she should have been acting as regent because she ruled in place when Viserys was on the verge of death and could no longer rule. However, because when Viserys ruled it was a time of peace, the council didn't feel as though it was appropriate for Alicent to be upon the throne this time, because war was upon them. This is something which we also saw being present amongst Rhaenyra and her council. Division over what to do, and the fact that because Rhaenyra was a woman, they felt as though women weren't as equipped for battle as what men were. So it was interesting that both Alicent and Rhaenyra faced that backlash in this episode. There was a scene where as Aemond ascended the position of council as regent, there was a close-up on Alicent where we heard everything from her perspective. We heard her breaths and the panic that she had within her. We saw her eyes looking like they were filled with fear as she was listening to what Aemond was commanding. And I think in that moment she realized that it was Aemond who did this to Aegon, and that what was to come was going to be a lot worse than if Aegon was ruling. She also noticed that he had the Valyrian blade that the king usually wields right at the beginning. So I'm imagining she's going to grow suspicious of her second son and begin to not trust him. Alicent has somewhat been on the fence in this season of the show, as she was questioning if Viserys wanted Aegon to actually be king. But with Aemond commanding for the people of King's Landing to be locked inside and not be permitted to leave, treating the citizens as prisoners, it's a type of ruling that's only going to make things worse for the Greens and turn the public against them. I also think this is going to push Alicent into a different direction. She's not only being neglected and undermined by her children, but also the council that she's served upon. So it's going to be interesting to see the direction that she takes. She's there for her son and doesn't want him to die, so I imagine he's going to be taking the priority for the time being. Aemond. The entire time that Aegon has been ruling, I've been sitting here thinking how much better of a king Aemond would be. But after only a couple of scenes with it in this episode, I've come to realise that whilst Aemond might be more clued up, Aegon was actually relatively harmless because he lacked the intelligence and know-how to cause much damage to the people. Granted, he killed the rat catchers, but that was him just acting on emotion. Aemond is viewing the people as his own, and he's keeping them inside the gates of King's Landing, a place which seems to be full of sickness, poverty, and no food. A place which people actually want to escape from. It feels like Aemond is going to rule with an iron fist, completely different to his brother, and especially Viserys. Like how Alicent and Rhaenyra's arc are mirroring one another, Aemond's arc is mirroring Daemon's in this season. They're both the middle brother, both feel as though they should be sat on the Iron Throne, and they're both doing what they can in order to ensure that they get there, going against the person that they swore loyalty to and looking to make their own gains. Aemond is currently leading the Greens, and the acts that he's permitting is going to cause their own undoing. As Miss Arya said, there's more than one way to win a war. So by allowing Aemond to parade a dragon head through the city, something which the people viewed as a bad omen as they viewed the dragons as gods, and also caging them in and giving them no freedom, the support for a crown which is coming across as unstable and actually harming the people is going to be more damaging than anything that Rhaenyra was plotting. As of right now, the people are turning, and it's because of Aemond and his actions. Daemon. Like I said, these two character arcs are very similar, and as Aemond is getting the people of King's Landing to turn on the crown, by Daemon allowing Sir Blackwood to slaughter the innocent Bracken people in order to get the Brackens to bend the knee, it's an approach that has gone against him with the aim of getting them to support the Targaryens. Innocent people are often victims of war, and this is the case with what Daemon's doing, treating the people as pawns in a game and like their lives have no independent value. Daemon's hunger for the throne is growing more and more, and the curse of Harrenhal has definitely taken its place within his mind. That, or the fact that Alice is poisoning his food and causing him to have the visions. Within this episode, we saw that he had a vision of his mother where she was calling him her favourite son and highlighting that he was born to wear the crown, but it was also revealed that he didn't properly know his mother, so that put a different perspective on the entire scene, as he was almost imagining what it was that she would be saying to him. He feels as though he deserves the throne and has fully gone against Rhaenyra, meaning that the Blacks are most definitely divided. He's happy to rule alongside her as equals, but that's it. It's interesting seeing how his mind is actually working. In the previous episode, he wanted to be referred to as Your Grace, and now that he was finally being called that, he wants to now be referred to as My King, even though it's not in the correct protocol, as he's only consort, but obviously, he feels he has more of a stake to the throne than anybody else. With Sir Harold now making his way to Harrenhal to speak with Daemon, it's going to be interesting seeing how he will be, where he can't avoid the confrontation that's going to be before him, which is going to be led by Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra. Within this episode, we saw Rhaenyra feeling lost with everything that was going on. She was obviously mourning Rhaenys, but at the same time, with that loss, her council were divided over how they should retaliate. She's facing being undermined when it comes to the tactics of warfare due to the fact that she's a woman. But at the same time, when she's alone, she's disappointed in the fact that she also doesn't feel as equipped in fighting as she'd want to be. This is due to the fact that because she was born as a girl, a sword was never immediately placed in her hand as it would have been if she were a boy. The doubt that others have in her is starting to enter her own mind and make her doubt if she's actually worthy of winning this war. The person that she feels she can trust most in her council is Corlys, and she actually wanted him to become her hand. However, he feels as though the house has already taken so much from him. His son, his daughter, the legitimacy of his line, and now his wife. But I think we will see him become hand to the queen. The most interesting part of this episode with Rhaenyra came at the end when she was speaking with Jace after he got back from agreeing to give the phrase Harrenhal if they bent the knee. It was said earlier on in the episode that Rhaenyra had no ground army and that with Aemond ascending the throne and having Vhagar, they need more dragons. With Silverwing and Vermithor being beneath the castle but without riders, Jace suggested looking outside of the direct bloodline and seeing those that have thin Targaryen blood and getting them on board to become dragon riders. The very thing that they need if they want to defeat Vhagar and the Greens. As Cole said to Alicent, they've given the war to the dragons, and dragons will be needed on both sides if there's going to be a more level battle. Aegon. Following Aemond commanding Dracarys for Vhagar onto Aegon in the previous episode, we saw that he was still alive but had suffered broken bones and severe burns on his body. He only awoke in the closing moments of the episode, and the only word he uttered was mummy. This was actually quite a heartbreaking moment in the episode, and it reminded me of when Viserys was lying on that exact bed in a similar condition. Aegon is a fool who sits on the Iron Throne and acts purely on his emotions, but in this instance, with him saying mummy, such a childlike way of calling for his mother, it really did show the dependency that he has on his mother, and the fact that he really wasn't ready to be king. Granted, he's an adult, but he's immature and doesn't hold the emotional intelligence to be able to rule, and with him calling for Alicent like that, it showed that he was childlike. My review of the episode. I thought this episode of the show was a really good one. The pacing of it was spot on, and the mirroring of all of the arcs, with them kind of imploding, is starting to become more apparent. I'm not gonna lie, the only part of the show that I'm getting a bit fed up with is Daemon in Harrenhal and the visions that he's having. I'm enjoying seeing the desire that Daemon has to sit on the throne, and the fact that he feels as though he deserves it, but it's just becoming rather repetitive, as he's not actually developed that much in the past 3 episodes. Daemon is such a great character, and I enjoy it most when he's interacting with people that are a threat. The fact that he just let the Bracken people walk away and crumbled felt a bit out of character, but I understand that the weight of his mind is quite heavy right now. Aemond's presence on screen when he says very little is something that I admire. A lot of the delivery from him comes from his body language, facial expressions, and in the eye. It's all very emotive, and his movements do a lot of the talking. He's happy to be a step closer to fully claiming the Iron Throne, and it feels like he's not going to stop where he is now. He clearly despises his brother, and wants to stop him from killing Aegon while he sleeps. I'm enjoying Aemond's betrayal and his desire for the throne. It's actually one of the more interesting parts of this season. I thought the scene where Alicent was sitting around the council and we heard everything from her perspective was such a great moment. Maybe even the best moment in this episode. The silence getting louder, the heartbeat, the breathing, and the panic that she clearly felt was all-consuming, and you could feel her understanding that things were going to be taking a turn for the worse for her house. There are only 3 episodes left of this season of the show, and I'm intrigued to see how they're going to conclude it. It feels like there's a lot of wrapping up to do in a short amount of time. I'm just hoping that this season isn't going to peak with episode 4, and in the build up towards the finale, we're still going to get some standout moments. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see. So, there you have it. House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 5, Ending Explained.